Silvestro Franchini could not fall asleep, although he desperately needed to, as he was only a few hours away from starting a difficult climb on Sema Busatza, a 3,362-meter wall of rock and loose snow. His mind drifted to 2010. The image of his brother, Tomas Franchini, standing in front of him, replayed in his mind over and over. 1 minute he was climbing, and the next he was falling. It had scared both of them to their core, as Tomas almost lost his life in that moment. Silvestro had major doubts for tomorrow. He caught himself overthinking. Was this wall cursed? Was the route too long? Was there fresh snow and a risk for avalanches? He knew, beginning to think, that the worst would happen was not a good mindset to have for someone about to attempt something dangerous. This time, though, he would not be climbing with his brother, although he wished more than anything that he could, but it was now impossible. Instead, his climbing partner would be Emanuele Andreozzi, an elite climber that Silvestro met due to his brother Tomas. Naturally, his mind towards climbing had become more pessimistic over time, as he had lost family and friends to the sport. Determined and unswayed, he shook off those thoughts, as his mind was made up. None of that mattered. Tomorrow was not for him. It was for his brother, the climbing prodigy that Silvestro desperately missed. He reminded himself that he shouldn't focus on the negative thoughts. He loved this mountain. Yes, there was the scare with his brother, but 2 years later the pair returned and forged a beautiful new route named Dreams and Nightmares. Silvestro had successfully climbed its ridge multiple times, but this time the route would be different. It was on the face, a vertical 3,363-meter rock and snow challenge that few would want to even attempt. Silvestro and Emanuele parked and left the car park at 4:45 a.m. He had approached the wall this way 2 times before with his brother. Thinking back on the time where they bivouacked the Presena Basin, he was jealous. Tomas was the climbing prodigy. Sometimes it looked too easy for him. Even when they camped in the snow, he would not sink down into the ground like most people. Instead, Silvestro remembers it always looked and felt like Tomas could fly when they were in the mountains. He smiled, looked at Emanuele, and they started to climb. The duo loved every moment of it. They worked well as a team and everything ran smoothly. A wide range of cams, an essential safety piece used for secure holds when climbing, was needed due to the different cracks on the rock. Even on the descent, everything went well. Within 11 hours, they were back in the heated car, thankful to be out of the cold Italian winter air. They just completed setting a new route. We had decided, without a doubt, what to call the new route. Tomas. It had certainly been in the right place, and the climbers who had followed it would surely have thought of him for a moment. His spirit had returned to that wall. I thought he would have liked that. This is the story of Tomas Franchini. Silvestro and Tomas from Italy's Trentino region were born in 1987 and 1989. It is not an exaggeration to say that they both grew up climbing together, challenging one another to new heights. But there was no doubt that from an early age, Tomas was born to climb. His climbing style was fast, unapologetic, but most of all, clean. Tomas was very proud of his skills, and from a young age had trouble listening to advice. He preferred the approach of making his own mistakes and figuring it out along the way. This led to many unnecessary risks in some of his early climbs, but it was also how he became so experienced. Tomas climbed solo and sometimes with other people, but most of all he loved climbing with his brother Silvestro. They were the perfect duo. Little had to be said as they understood each other better than anyone else could. The mountains brought them closer together and gave them motivation in their lives. Their bond seemed invincible. The pair grew up honing their skills in their backyard, on the Brenta Dolomites, a mountain range located in the province of Trentino in northeastern Italy. The mountain range has some notable peaks for climbing and skiing, with the tallest being right around 3,150 meters. or 10,352 feet. But nestled in the heart of the region is the ski resort and town of Madonna de Campiglio, where the brothers spent most of the year working as mountain guides or ski instructors. Any free time was spent climbing and challenging themselves to further and further mountains. Tomas's climbing journey really started to take off around 2011, but it wasn't until 2013 when he started to get some actual recognition. In November of 2013, Tomas Franchini and Francesco Salvaterra climbed a much discussed but frightening line on the south face of Cerro Rincon, climbing right under a massive serac that overhangs some 50 meters. The risks were extremely high, as loose snow or strong winds could cause an avalanche directly in the climber's path. This 2,422 meter wall of ice and rock was an impressive feat, and even earned him the Paolo Consiglio Award from the Italian academic Alpine Club, which is an award that is given to a European expedition that carries out a significant exploratory activity in Alpine style, while keeping respect for the environment. But this was only the start to his mountaineering career. It was around the same time that Tomas partnered with 60-year-old Hermano Salvaterra and 2 other climbers as they attempted the unspoiled west face of Torre Eger, one of the peaks in the southern Patagonia ice field in Argentina. The 2,685-meter near-vertical rock wall is an impressive sight for any climber. Surrounded by other peaks that look very similar, the mountain range looks like heaven for big wall climbers. But what stood out most from this expedition was not the climb, but the hardships each man had to face. Bad weather trapped them on the wall for nearly 10 days as they managed to reach to about 300 meters below the summit. Due to the nature of the rock, there was little shelter, as the men had to hang hammocks to protect themselves from the environment. They forced their way up the mountain through the harsh winds and storms, but in the end, it was not enough. They came short 300 meters of the summit. It was a lesson for the young climber, as he learned more about himself and what he could endure. The next year, on May 19, 2014, Tomas would solo climb a mixed line route that he named the Elfo del Brenta on the Antonio y Piedra pillar of Cima Tosa, a 550-meter pitch classified as WI5+, V+, M4+. WI5+ is a very difficult water ice climb, requiring significant experience and skill. V+ is a serious alpine climb, demanding a full day and involving objective hazards. M4+ is a moderate mixed climb that introduces technical dry tooling. It is a magical line of rock, snow, and ice, formed during the spring. He only used a 60-meter rope, 5 ice screws, and a few micro nuts, having to traverse various sections of snow, ice, and rock. Tomas's technical skills, specifically for wall and ice climbing, were becoming undeniable. By now, he had become a local legend, and there was few alive that could match him or his knowledge of the Brenta Dolomites. In 2015, Tomas would be accompanied by his brother Silvestro. The original plan was to attempt to enter the Cordillera Blanca range and climb different hidden peaks. The plan was only supposed to last 15 to 20 days, but during their initial trek, Tomas got bit by a stray dog. A rabies vaccine and booster was required daily for weeks at a hospital, limiting his travel abilities. Not feeling comfortable making the journey deep into the range anymore, they pivoted to closer peaks and decided to first climb the west face of Nevado Chirrup, a 5,493 meter mountain. But the duo would actually start at base camp, right around 4,550 meters. It took them 9 hours. The climb at the base was actually great, but the rock deteriorated the higher up they went. Apart from this success, they completed 3 more ascents, including a fast 3-day climb of Nevado Huscarian Sur. At 6,738 meters, it was the highest mountain in Peru. After finding success in Europe, Tomas turned to the Asian continent for his next adventure. In 2016, with Nicola Benelli, Luca Cornella, and his brother Silvestro, they made the first ascent of the east pillar of Kishvar Shivling, opening the Via dei Tritini. The pillar looks like what you expect from Tomas, an intense vertical rock wall with overhangs in certain areas. At the time, the group doubted the route was even possible. They even had a scare when in the middle of the night, there was a loud roar as an avalanche missed their tents by a few meters. The rock was fragile, and loose pieces would hit the men. On one day, Silvestro was hit in the head, and Luca got struck badly on the shoulders. It was brutal, and there was many unnecessary risks. They had to take multiple days to recover, but battled through and found success in an unlikely place. 2017 brought more climbing and even more success for the Franchini brothers. Due to bad weather that grounded most climbing activities in Patagonia in January, they hopped onto a tent for a 2-day trek and made the 500-kilometer journey from El Chaltén to El Rincón. The brothers teamed up with park ranger Mariano Ignacio Spiso and together quickly established a new route on the west face of Cerro Colorado. With more days to climb on the journey, the trio set off with practically no information whatsoever, attempt the virgin southeast face of Cerro Penitentes, and reach the unclimbed 2,771 meters high northeast summit. They only brought one tent, one sleeping bag, and enough food for 3 days. After seeing how steep the mountain was, Spiso decided to stay behind. The brothers started their climb at 2:30 a.m. on the 26th of January. Silvestro described their climb the best. The wall was completely silent. We needed to avoid the rock fall and quickly climbed up the right-hand side of the face, past a long goulette with waterfall ice, then past mixed terrain and snow ramps. The snow hit the face at 6, and shortly after 8 we reached the northeast summit. The new route is called El Mariano. In October that same year, Tomas joined a major expedition to climb Mount Edgar in China, an insidious mountain 6,618 meters high that had only been climbed twice before. Access to the mountain was difficult, as the leading glacier was littered with crevasses and steep slopes. The expedition included 2 teams of 3 climbers, with each team trying different routes. Tomas's team was attempting the East Ridge. After spending days acclimatizing and preparing, they set out on October 17th, but their attempt came to a halt at 5,800 meters. The line was too complicated and dangerous. The other team also failed in their own route, so they all descended to regroup and replan. After a few days' rest, there was a small weather window, so the group decided to follow the 2003 Korean route and were fortunate enough to all reach the summit. The expedition took 40 days and was a special climb. On his way back home, Tomas would state, "This mountain has been attempted several times from different faces. It has always forced great and expert mountaineers from all over the world to abandon their attempts. I've come to the conclusion I climbed Mount Edgar, a difficult, complex, high, remote, and wild mountain. I climbed it alone at night, accompanied by the moon. Yes, perhaps I really did do something great." One of his most impressive years was 2018, when Tomas and his brother climbed across the 13 highest mountains in the Andes, above 6,500 meters. It was a 43-day-long journey, but the brothers loved every minute of it, climbing vertical walls of snow as they summited mountain after mountain. Silvestro remembers on a few occasions it felt like the mountains did not want them to be there. Illuminated by the moon, they looked at each other's eyes and continued to push higher. The adrenaline felt so intense that it was a high to the duo, and they would only be satisfied after giving their best. At this point, it felt like nothing would stop Tomas, and there was still more. After such a great year, Tomas knew he had to up the challenge, so he turned to China's unclimbed east face of Lamoshi, a 6,070-meter mountain that is completely isolated from the outside world. Locals rarely, if ever, travel to its base, as it is just hard to reach. Surrounded by thick forests and vegetation, one has to travel on a very thin path, created by locals who occasionally search for medicinal herbs. Tomas would travel with climbing partner Pietro Pico, and together they laid the foundation for the climb. The duo hired 2 local farmers, and for the next month they transported their gear and supplies to the mountain's base. While this was all going on, there was constant rain. The men simply got used to being wet for most of their days there, but it took a heavy toll on them, especially Pico. They managed to set up base camp right around 3,400 meters by digging a small platform in the ground. A 3-man tent was set up, and that would be home for the next few days. There was nothing fancy. If something went wrong, it would take too long to get a message back to the small village, and then to local authorities. They were completely on their own. The weather eventually got to Pico, and he decided that enough is enough. He left Tomas, but not before helping set up a camp at 4,400 meters, with all the gear necessary to climb. However, that very same day, May 14th, the rain stopped and the sun was out. Tomas faced a dilemma. He could climb, but did not feel like he had the proper gear as he was sitting at base camp and wanted the equipment from the camp 1,000 meters above him. Instead, he decided to climb light, Alpine style, and take nothing with him except his crampons, ice axe, and a light jacket. His rope and harness was left behind. After finding a direct route to the southeastern face, he started to climb right after midday. Tomas would reach the northeast ridge, and from there, he made it to the summit. It took about 7 hours. He appreciated the view and the journey to get there. This one was special. Not only was it a world first, he did it alone and without the proper gear to do it in a safe manner. On his way down, mist settled on the mountain, confusing Tomas. He waited it out for a couple hours and finally made it back to base camp 21 hours after starting his climb. For Tomas, it was not about glory, and this is proven by his next actions. While most would call their trip here, over the next few days, Tomas made 2 more ascents of unclimbed peaks on subsidiary spurs off the long northeast ridge of La Moshi. One of the peaks, a 5,000-meter mountain, he named Pietro's Pico, in honor of his climbing friend, which Tomas claims none of this trip would have been possible without. This climb earned him a spot on the Piets d'Or mentions in 2020. 3 years later, in 2022, Tomas was in the headlines again. This time, it was in the Karakorum, Pakistan, a world-famous mountain range notorious for intense weather and deadly peaks. Most notably, it is where K2 lies. But that was not Tomas's goal. Instead, he was there to explore the area in search of unclimbed mountains. Not one in particular, but multiple. He teamed up with other mountaineers, Philip Brugger and Lucas Waldner. They started their expedition about mid-May. Traversing unclimbed or unknown terrain is more dangerous than climbing somewhere already mapped out. Any step could be on loose snow, with a hidden crevasse waiting to swallow you whole. Extreme caution and understanding risks were very important. It was Tomas's style. He loved the unknown. It is what drew him to the mountains. Luckily, the weather was good, and the trio found a 6,653-meter virgin peak called Shayi Sar, with a beautiful line of ice up the north face. It was all they needed. Camp was set up around 4,600 meters at 3 a.m., and off they went. For the next 11 hours, they scaled the peak to success. Their descent seemed more difficult than the climb up, and the men would make it back to base camp at 7 p.m., leaving no gear or trace that they were even there. Not wanting the trip to end there, Tomas set out on his own to climb 2 other unclimbed peaks, Gypsy Sar and Kras von Zartgeren. He would summit both. Before Tomas left, he looked around and promised himself he would be back. It was hard not to be excited for the future. The Karakorums opened a new door for him. There were so many more peaks he could attempt. This expedition got him another mention on the Piets d'Or 2023. In 2024, Tomas would return to Peru with his good friend Cristobal of Chile. Together, they would attempt to climb northeast face of Kashan in the Cordillera Blanca. The idea was Tomas's, as he was familiar with the mountain range and loved the area. They started their summit push on June 1st and made good progress up the mountain. That night, the duo would camp together on the face of the mountain, and everything seemed to be going as planned. The morning of June 2nd came, and the duo was excited for what lay ahead of them. Just as they were about to start getting ready, Tomas stood outside his tent on a snow cornice, an overhang of sorts that is tight snow and sometimes rock compacted together, when all of a sudden, it collapsed. He fell, and there was no stopping it. Cristobal watched in horror. He quickly raised the alarm, and a rescue party was put together, but there was little hope of survival. His body was found the next day, and an extensive recovery mission successfully retrieved him. Franchini was born to climb mountains, and he was destined to climb them fast, clean, with a pure, no-compromise approach. This video does not do his long list of climbing achievements justice, as I could not talk about everything, otherwise we would be here for hours. But I encourage you to go read up about Tomas. His story is incredible. His brother would go on to say, "It was hard for rescuers to find you, because they were searching on the ground. You have to look at the sky. He is now the skinny bird flying. You have to look there. You don't have to look down."